I am Ryan, the Life Changer, and I am so grateful that you decided to join me today. This podcast is called Unlock the Power of Your Mind. Let me ask you a question. Are you ready for your life to change? Are you ready to unlock the power of your mind? Are you ready to be the best version of you possible? I want to help you. I want this podcast to give new, positive meanings to the difficult times that you faced in your life. And I want to help you become the best version of you possible. This is your time. The change is happening for you now. I know you're ready. Let's help today to change your life. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for joining me for another episode of Unlock the Power of Your Mind. Ladies and gentlemen, the guest that I have on today, if this was 4 years ago when I had my podcast, I would probably never be open to having this individual on. But because of some personal experiences in my life, I am super excited and very, very, very much know that this guest is going to help to make a positive impact in your life. I want you to keep an open mind as you're listening to my conversation today with Christine Lang. She is a medical intuitive, and she calls herself the Body Whisperer. Christine, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. I appreciate it.
So I know that the listeners are saying the Body Whisperer, medical intuitive. I don't know what those are. So share with the listeners what it is you do and how you help people.
So every medical intuitive works a little bit differently, probably just like different therapists or surgeons work differently. And my skills are such that when I meet somebody or talk to them even on the phone, I start seeing the energy in their body and I start hearing their spirit describe how their body and their life got to be the way that it is right now. And so it's very focused on present moment, what's happening, not so much your future or that sort of thing. And so doctors and practitioners refer their patients to me when Western medicine might be able to diagnose what it is, but there's not a whole lot they can do for it. And then I help people understand how they're internalizing their stress and storing it in their body, and how their symptoms aren't just the body breaking down. Their symptoms are messages from their spirit helping them to live a life that's more positive and more peaceful and more powerful.
Well, I'm sure that there's a lot of listeners out there right now where if you ask them if they were stressed, they'd say yes. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there right now, if you ask them, hey, is there something bothering you with your body? I'm sure almost everybody would find something to say yes to, right? So I think you've caught almost every listener's attention, right?
Yeah. I mean, we all just live in a world that is, we're so bombarded with stimulus right now. We all have stress to varying degrees on varying days. And how we internalize that has a lot to do with how we were raised and were we taught to think things were our fault or someone else's fault or God's fault. How we internalize our stress has to do with how we see ourselves and how we see the universe.
So I agree with you 100%. So that the listeners can feel connected to you, Christine, share a little bit, because I know the jump on how you got into this a little bit, which is was shocking to me. So let's take the listeners real quickly kind of down that path. Where did you grow up? Was this something that you were always into? Was this something?
Oh my gosh, no. I was raised Catholic, so I always say I'm kind of a recovering Catholic because I was a normal kid, traditional family, and raised the American way, seek money and power. So ended up at a top 10 law school in the U.S. and came out of law school and was doing really well. But while I was in law school, developed pretty severe allergies. And, that was back before the days of Zyrtec and meds they have now that don't make you drowsy. So my two options were take Benadryl and drink Diet Coke to stay awake in my law school classes or walk around with a box of tissues. So as soon as I graduated law school, I started just on this quest. I thought, I've got to find a cure for these allergies. This is ridiculous. And along the way, started studying different types of alternative medicine, from homeopathy to Chinese herbs and acupuncture. And I started, realizing that there was a link between my stress and my allergies. So I started meditating and doing yoga. And then I learned how to do energy healing, Reiki. And I started realizing that before I offered a friend an energy treatment, if I sat and meditated to kind of change channels in my brain, get out of the lawyer mode and into a service mode, I would know things about them that I had no way of knowing. And so I started realizing that I could pick up things on people. And the more I sat in meditation, the stronger the ability got. And that was 20 some years ago. And like I said, when I was a lawyer, I would have thought what I did was way too airy fairy. It would have seemed like hocus pocus. And yet it's, I've now worked with thousands and thousands of people and spoken in front of large conferences and done demonstrations on stage. And, it's amazing how amazingly helpful your spirit is trying to be in sending you these messages that we call physical symptoms.
Yeah, so, I agree 100%. And it makes me feel more comfortable to hear you say that here. This is something that you've been doing now for 20 years. And you can say that back in the law school days, you probably wouldn't have had a conversation with you now, right?
No, not at all. And because of that, I think I end up working with a lot of corporate executives and pro athletes and celebrities who, I'm everybody's last call. And I'm okay with that. I don't take it personally. It is kind of out there. And yet, the proof is in the pudding. And when their symptoms go away and they also get some sort of transformation for themselves, a different way of looking at, the sibling they always fight with, or a different way of relating to their kids, they see the gift in it.
Sure. So let's start here, and then I'll open up with the listeners and share a little bit of my story. But I know you had mentioned some of the different individuals that you work with, athletes and top level CEOs and famous people. In general, what would somebody come to you with, Christine, where they feel like they're kind of at that last ditch point? What are some of the symptoms?
I would say that the most common things people come in with are what we call, chronic, these persistent symptoms, whether it's IBS or Crohn's or back pain or migraines or things that Western medicine can tell you what it is, but there's not really much of a cure or not much of, of medicine that doesn't have a lot of side effects. And so helping people understand how their stress is related to that. And as they start mitigating their stress and their symptoms go away, it's, I had a client that I just had a follow-up session with last week, and she was diagnosed with, celiacs, IBS, Crohn's. They kind of threw all those, definitions at her and diagnoses. And then it progressed. And so she restricted her diet. She was taking the medicine they recommended. And then it went from there into hives, and they were covering her whole body. And so when she came to see me, her spirit, said to me, she's so afraid because her daughter ended up in the hospital last year and she never saw it coming, and she's just lost confidence in physical bodies and all these. And as she understood her fear and let go of it and worked through it, the hives went away. Then the bowels calmed down. And, I talked to her last week, and all her symptoms are gone after, 2 or 3 sessions of really working through and learning how to meditate, learning how to journal a bit, and hearing why her symptoms came up in the first place, of her spirit saying, you don't want to live the rest of your life this way. You don't want to walk around waiting for the shoe to drop, terrified all the time. And once she kind of exhaled and understood that, she saw those symptoms as a blessing, had gratitude that her spirit was trying to get her to live this more peaceful, happy life, and the whole thing released.
Is she off all of her medications now?
Yes, she's been off all of her meds now for, a couple months and no symptoms.
That is so powerful. That is incredible. That's a huge thing for me, because I think that we live in a world today where, unfortunately, I'm stressed. Great, take a Xanax. I can't sleep. Okay, right. Take a sleeping pill, right? I can't focus. Great, take an Adderall. And instead of figuring out, well, why do I feel stressed and I can't sleep? It's, no, don't worry about that. Just take this pill and you'll fall right asleep.
Right. And I think, to be fair to, all of us humans who have ended up in that spot, because Western medicine has specialized in just ameliorating symptoms and eliminating them through meds, that's how we've all been conditioned too. And doctors weren't trained to ask the question, why do you think that's happening?
Yeah, I think, you're absolutely right. They maybe haven't been trained to ask that question, and or it's come to the point that the healthcare industry now, and I don't want to get off topic, but I want to say it. It's come to the point now where so much of like a business and paperwork and everything else.
Right.
Sometimes I don't think that they even have the time. They want to ask the question. They don't have the time to do it.
I agree. I have doctors who refer clients to me and they say, like, I know there's an emotional component to what's going on here. I only have 14 minutes per patient. That's what the healthcare system has relegated me to. I don't have time to get into it, and I don't want to ask them a question and then have to cut them off. So I'm just going to send them to you. So it's a sad state of affairs on that end of it for sure. But sure. I think once people start recognizing that their symptoms aren't just their body breaking down, they might actually be their spirit and their higher self trying to help them live a better life. It's a totally different way of relating to your body.
Absolutely. So I'll be open and vulnerable and transparent and share a little bit about what my experience was like for the listeners with an energy healer. Hopefully we can get them kind of believing in what it is that you do and how you help people, and then you and I can dive in a little bit further. But my first experience with an energy healer was arranged for me through my ex-fiance. And to be honest with you, Christine, I told my ex, I said, yeah, just go ahead, tell her to do whatever it is that she does, and I'm just going to go to work. And while at work, and this is how crazy it is, because I remember the time of day. It was right about 11 a.m. And I subsequently later that night asked, what time did the individual start the clearing process? Mm-hmm. And she said late morning. And sure enough, that was right when I started to notice my first feeling. So I felt very light, very inexplainably light. Later that day, got home, felt a little bit tired, but it was Friday. It was at the end of a week, and I didn't really think much of it. That Friday night, I had nightmares about being on a soccer field, laying in the soccer field, and snakes coming up from the grass. And I can't tell you when the last time it was that I had any kind of nightmares, certainly not any with snakes. And the next morning, woke up, felt like I had got hit by a dump truck. I had some of the worst feelings and negative thoughts going through my mind that I felt like my mind was struggling, like my mind wanted to be positive, but there was some negative thoughts that just kept creeping into my head, and I kept trying to push them out.
And had the energy healer told you anything?
No.
Okay.
No, and briefly a little bit, but maybe they didn't even realize that it was going to be to this extent. And I want the listeners to understand I'm not exaggerating this or trying to say this so that I can get your attention. This really was where I was at. I mean, some of the lowest of low points emotionally that I had felt, yet also this sense of peace that there was a greater good coming.
Nice.
Okay. And Sunday morning, all Saturday was shot with how I was feeling. Sunday, the next morning, a little bit rough, but better. No nightmares or crazy dreams Saturday night. And then I would say by the end of the day, Sunday, I started just feeling really, really good. And the other thing that I noticed was in between my eyes, I felt like a pressure almost starting to get released just above my nose. And it was like for the first time in my life, I felt like I was getting this intuitive sense the weeks thereafter, where I could speak to people and really connect with them and almost kind of like understand whether what I was saying was getting through to them or whether it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And then making those adjustments. And boy, it was like, I work in the health and wellness industry and helping to change people's lives through, healthy eating and exercise and everything like that. I mean, I was getting into conversations with people where they're like, Ryan, I feel like I've known you my whole life. We were sitting there crying together. And I had a large amount of success in being able to connect with people. And from that point, I said, whatever this is, I don't fully understand it, whatever it is, I believe in it. So maybe you can kind of break down with the listeners a little bit about what was happening to me there in your profession.
Yeah, so I would say your story is pretty extreme as to what people experience, and it sounds like you had some really dark energy on you for whatever reason, right? That it could be that you spent time around some really angry people, some really depressed people. Sometimes if we go to certain places, like certain bars where people are really depressed, or, you know, if somebody goes to visit somebody in a hospital or in a prison where there's just a lot of fear and anxiety and anger, you can come out of there and feel like energetically you need a shower. And some people are kind of like Velcro. They really pick up a lot of those energies. And it's like a dark coating on you. And sending somebody a whole lot of positive energy, like it sounds like she did, can kind of go in and start, it's like, you know, running your car through the car wash, starts pulling all those filmy layers off. And when you describe that opening right above, you know, your eyes, that's what we call the sixth chakra, right? So your sixth chakra is your third eye. It has to do with how intuitive you are. And people who are more intuitive have a higher EQ. They relate to people, they're more intuitive. And so by kind of cleaning that dark, heavy energy off of you, first you became more aware that it was even there, which is that depression for a day or two. And then as it was all cleansed off, you got to access the benefit of how intuitive you naturally are. You didn't have all that dark energy. So I'd say knowing that you might be a sensitive person who collects a lot of that, I would probably recommend, hey, every year or so, go get an energy treatment just so you don't have that accumulation.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that was spot on, you know, spot on. And so let's say one of the listeners is thinking, all right, I believe Ryan because this is his show, but I'm not really so sure that this is something that I want to do. What would you say, Christine, if you have somebody that's kind of on the fence or maybe hasn't quite gotten to the point where they feel like they've exhausted all the energies, but you know
Right.
how it is you can help people?
Well, and I would say first, everybody has at least one chronic symptom, whether it's, you know, oh, my low back goes out a lot. I have knee issues. You know, I get stomach upset. I mean, a lot of people will say, no, I'm really healthy. And then I'm like, oh, is there anything you take daily? Well, there is blood pressure medication and the acid reflux medication I take. You know, they start listing these things that they take either every day or with regularity. Those are your chronic conditions, right? So understanding how those chronic conditions can represent different messages that are typically sent from our spirit. So for instance, if people store their stress in the stomach area, that can create symptoms of anything from acid reflux to food sensitivities to just a frequent upset stomach or, you know, heartburn. And that really is a message about how you see yourself and how you think other people see you. And so, you know, a boss can walk into an office and scream at everybody, right? You people aren't performing, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, one guy gets a headache, one guy gets a stomach ache, one person gets, you know, stiff neck. Everybody internalizes that anger that guy threw out and screamed at everybody. Everybody internalizes that stress differently based on, like I said, how you were raised to view certain types of criticism and stress and upset. And so if you're someone who tends to internalize your stress as a reflection of you, did I screw up? Am I doing it wrong? How are people judging me or assessing me? You're going to get more symptoms in that stomach and digestive tract area because that's your, quote, weak area of the body. So understanding that and finding ways to release that stress and look at it from a different perspective can start lessening those symptoms. And I would say it's very common for people who start seeing me as a client to get off their Prilosec or whatever, you know, those kind of meds are taking within a few weeks. Because once you start making that connection of like, oh, wait a minute, maybe this isn't about me, maybe it's not, you know, and relating to your stress and your symptoms in a different way, it's a game changer.
For sure. What about sinuses? I would say if you were to ask me the one thing that does chronically bother me, and it's been for some time, I would say sinus pressure.
Okay. So there's two different ways to look at that. The first is allergies, people who have allergies. So their sinuses bother them because what they're really doing is having an immune response, an autoimmune response. Then that has to do with usually your foundation, meaning your your set of beliefs about how you think the world works, how fair things are. And when we think that the world isn't fair, or we're not following the rules and, quote, doing it right, then we're likely to see an immune issue. So that could be anything from, hey, I play by all the rules. Why am I the one that got fired and not the guy next to me? Or I play by all the rules and I do everything I was taught to do, and yet I'm still not getting ahead and other people are. Anytime we think that kind of the game feels rigged, things feel unfair, we tend to internalize that and have it show up in our body as an immune issue. So if you have allergies, it's about looking for what are the beliefs that I have that I might be kind of allergic to, so to speak, and are causing my system to be stressed. And the other way to get sinus pressure like that is people who have unshed tears. It tends to be stored, that stress tends to be stored underneath in the sinuses, right? And so a lot of times people who have chronic sinus pressure, there's something they haven't finished grieving. We, as Americans, we give ourselves a certain amount of time to grieve, whether it's a loss of a pet or a relationship or a job. We're like, okay, that's enough. I should be over it by now. And we sort of suppress that last little bit of grief. And that can sit in our sinuses, and then we're prone to sinus pressure, sinus infections, those sorts of symptoms as well.
Wow. It's funny. It's not funny. It's incredibly accurate because the listeners know, because I've been promoting it a little bit, but I'm writing my book and it's almost completed. And I was speaking with my therapist the other day, and we were talking about the loss of my mother at a young age, and the fact that I never really not that I never really handled it, but in writing the book and speaking about it publicly, and the whole world is going to know about it, I felt like I'm now ready to talk about it, because I can use it as a message of to people like, hey, listen, no matter what it is that you faced in your life, you can get through it and overcome it. But I guess I never really fully processed it, processed that loss. And me writing the book is helping me to do that. So you have no idea how completely accurate you are when you say that about tears not fully being shed. Wow.
Yeah. Well, so often children aren't helped through the grief process. Adults tend to say things like, oh, kids are resilient, kids will get over it, as a way of giving themselves a pardon on helping kids process grief.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. Sorry, I'm just kind of like,
No, it's perfectly fine. And even just that acknowledgement of like, oh, wow, that's what this is. When you feel that sinus pressure, if you can take 5 minutes and pause and say, okay, what's some sadness I feel right now about the loss of my mother? Like, I just saw a Hallmark commercial, or I just had this thought, or I just thought, oh, I wish she was here. And you can finish that grieving process more consciously now and release that pressure as it comes up.
And I just want the listeners to know, if Christine said this to me 4 years ago, I would have said, get the heck out of here. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the barometric pressure and everything like that. But ever since that event back in 2016, when I experienced energy healing for the first time, and just how physical the emotions were, how I felt those in my body so intensely, it completely opened up my mind to what it is that you do and how you help people. So share with the listeners, Christine, maybe one of the individuals that you've worked with where you felt, wow, I really helped to change this individual's life through your energy healing.
Okay. I would say I had someone who was a brilliant person, and she really didn't have the success that people thought she should have in her corporate career. And she was quite powerful, but there was still some limitations she was putting on herself. And she had chronic laryngitis. Like, every cold that went around the office, she lost her voice. Every little thing, and she had to clear her throat a lot. That was clearly her kind of weak spot of the body. And when she came in, her spirit, as soon as I connected to her spirit showed me a visual of her sitting at dining room table as a kid. She looked like she was maybe 5 years old. And she said something, and her father backhanded her so hard she like fell off her chair. And when I said, this is the little movie your spirit is showing me, she started crying and said, oh my God, I'd forgotten all about that. And he said, in that moment you learn, don't speak up against strong male energy, or you could be, knocked off your chair. And she realized that she'd always had a male figurehead in whatever company she was in that had a strong male voice. And that's how she'd always checked herself. And so her spirit walked her through a guided meditation to kind of release some of that fear and do some healing in that moment as she was sitting in it. And she said, not only did she not like lose her voice over the next cold and flu season, like she just didn't get any colds. She didn't clear her throat, like all the mucus in her throat, the postnasal drip, it was all gone as she left that day, never came back. And she went on to get to the highest level in that company, and then went out and started her own company. And I won't say what it is because that would out her, but it's a very well-known company. And she's, multi-millionaire. And it was like, it unleashed her. Right. And she said, I didn't realize how my mind was, my subconscious was holding me back to, quote, keep me out of trouble.
Wow. And so at no point in time, so she acknowledged that event did happen in her life.
Yes. Yes.
And at no point in time prior to working with you did she realize that that's like had an effect on her?
She hadn't even remembered it. And I love these, what I call the cold call cases where somebody, her assistant made her appointment. I never even talked to her. She walked into my office in a very expensive suit, pulled up in a new Jaguar. I mean, she was coming in all business, like, let's just get this over with kind of thing.
Me back in 2016,
yeah, I mean,
100%.
And I always say, like, you can't offend me with that because I don't know that I would have believed either. And I'm happy to be people's last line of defense because I know this stuff works. And so she sat down and she, just said, well, it's embarrassing that I have this postnasal drip and I'm always clearing my throat and losing my voice. And somebody told me you could help. So here's your one shot at it kind of thing. So her spirit jumped in and showed me that video. And I would have I've never seen her before. I would have no way of knowing that, scene from her childhood. And when I, opened my eyes after channeling her spirit, she was crying. And she's like, oh my God, I'd forgotten all about that.
Wow.
So that was that release of like, okay, here's where that limiting belief and that cap she put on herself came from. And just by acknowledging it, you free yourself up. We obviously, her spirit had really good suggestions and we talked through it and processed it in that moment so that she left there lighter. I give people an energy treatment the last few minutes and she said, oh, wow, I was able to just kind of clear all that heavy, dark energy off of her throat right then. And she left feeling lighter and she will still call me periodically. And it's funny now she wants to ask her spirit questions like, okay, I'm thinking of hiring this new CEO for the company. Here are the two candidates. What does my spirit think? And her spirit will give her input on, say, well, that guy actually has a second job offer from this company. And she's like, oh my God, that's right. So
wow.
Yeah, it's truly an honor to be able to hear people's spirits in the way that I do. And, people usually start off coming in because of a physical symptom, but they remain my clients for 15, 16 years. Because they want to come in and ask about relationships and ask about just intuitive hits that their spirit can get on things.
Well, I mean, for what you did for that woman, right? And I'm sure for how you help your clients across the board, who wouldn't? That's truly life change. Like you in that moment in that office with that Jaguar outside, right? That and her suit. You changed her life that day in a way, that suit was never going to make her feel a certain way about herself to stand up to that boss, right?
Right.
No matter what car she drove, she was never going to feel proud enough of herself to stand up to that,
right.
dominant male figure. Or you understand where I'm going with that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You empowered her through her spirit to realize, hey, it's okay. I am enough. And, just because this person did this to me doesn't mean that it needs to stick with me the rest of my life.
Well, and we don't even realize that, the coping mechanisms that we come up with in response to our pain and our painful events through our childhood, through our teen years, through our 20s. I mean, we all have painful things that happen, and then our subconscious and our conscious mind try to come up with an explanation of why that happened and how we can protect ourselves from it going forward. And so often the ways that we try to protect ourselves from it end up being these really limiting beliefs. And the physical symptoms are our spirit's way of trying to get our attention and say, wait a minute, you've outgrown that belief. It's not serving you anymore. So let me give you this physical symptom so you can kind of dive into that.
Yeah. Wow. So, Christine, for the listeners that aren't as familiar, is this something that has to be done in person? Is there a visual needed? How is it that you work with your clients?
It's not. I can work with people just over the phone. I can hear your voice and connect to your spirit. Although I have clients all over the world, and my clients who are in Europe and Australia and China, I end up doing Zoom sessions with them so that I can, which is like Skype, so that I can see them and watch their energy while they're talking. But yeah, I have clients all over. Just it's so interesting how it's such a universal thing that binds us, just how we each internalize our stress. And I think people want to get more connected to their own higher self and be more connected to their own truth. So I walk people through exercises of going into your body and feeling what that symptom has to tell you. And people think, oh, I can't do that. But if you get quiet enough, you really can. In fact, on my website, there are free guided meditations that can help you kind of get centered and connect to your spirit.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but it makes me want to say, all right, Christine, let's just go ahead and do one with me right now. So I'm sure, hopefully, at least some of the listeners are not how I was prior to 2016. Hopefully, we've at least opened some of them up to being open to participating with you, Christine. Share with the listeners how they can get in touch with you. I don't know if you're certain social media that you're active on or email. What's the best way for them to reach you?
The best way is go to my website, which is christinelang.org, O-R-G. And you can, send me an email if you're, there's descriptions on my website of what a session is like. There's free guided meditations. There's free little mini classes. There's an online course people buy because they want to learn to connect to their spirit themselves, which I definitely encourage. And there's all kinds of resources there that are free that you can use to start that process yourself of connecting into your own spirit so you can increase your own intuition, not just about your physical symptoms, but about all your relationships at work, your personal life. Your whole life gets enhanced by a better connection to your spirit.
Yeah. I would absolutely agree. So christinelang.org, ladies and gentlemen, I want to highly encourage you to reach out to Christine and consume more, learn more. I know after I had it done for the first time, I was like super into it and wanting to learn so much. So Christine, thank you so very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. So much respect and belief for what it is that you do. And so I'm so happy we had the opportunity to connect and share more of your message.
Oh, thanks for having me. I always love talking about this because it is so life-changing, for sure.
Awesome. All right, Christine, thank you again so much. Have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast today. My prayer is that it has helped to change your life, to make a positive impact in your life. And I just want to let you know that every single day, the first goal that I write down is I have changed 1 million lives. So ladies and gentlemen, if this podcast helped to change your life today, I would ask you to please go on to iTunes, rate, review, and share this episode with somebody else who you know will benefit and have their life changed. Thank you again so very much. It means the world to me. Go out there and be great today. Make a positive impact in the world.